Okay, so hey guys, welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Nakatani versus Chitpattana fight. And so if you're on around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do need a like video, and let's get straight into it. So Chitpattana, also known as Tasana Salapat or Pech CP Freshmart, I'm gonna probably refer to him as Pech because there's various different names there. I mean, a lot of Thai fighters, of course, are or do have that CP kind of fresh part name. You think of the likes of like a Neom Chong, also has that as well. And like I said, there are various other Thai fighters that are sponsored by them, so also come with that name as well. So it's uh, like I say, just another fighter with various different names. But like I say, that's just what I'm going to refer to him as, just to avoid any confusion. Nakatani is 28-0 though with 21 KOs, and Pech is 76-1 with 53 KOs. This fight is for the WBC World Bantamweight title. Nakatani's last fight was a win via KO in round 1 versus Astrolabio, and Pech's last fight was a win via unanimous decision versus Lee. They are both southpaws. Petch's loss came by unanimous decision versus Inouye in 2018, and that was for the, I believe, WBC World Bantamweight interim belt. But yeah, to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I mentioned, this is the return of Nakatani off a really destructive performance last time out. Pretty much just the only shot he threw. Beautiful body shot, probably the most accurately placed shot in which you can see in boxing. It was beautiful, and against Estrelabia, who, perhaps wasn't the biggest of names and, perhaps not the toughest of tests, he has given various tests and has been able to cause problems to a lot of the guys higher up around the division in the past. But like I say, that was a really destructive, great finish, and he's really riding high right now. I mean, he is probably, the second biggest name in Japanese fighting, bar, of course, Naoya Inoue, and so he's also probably pound for pound ranked in the top 10 in my opinion. So yeah, I think he's on a great run at the moment. I think he is keeping busy, which I like with this fight. Perhaps we would like to see a bit of a tougher test, but it's nice to see that he's wanting to keep fighting in this division, and he's wanting to get a few relatively big wins around in this division before he kind of moves straight up. Some of the weight divisions in which he has fought in the past, of course, he is a freeweight world champion. Some of the weights in which he's fought in the past, he's moved quite quickly, and he hasn't kind of, I suppose, stopped and defeated all comers. But for now, it seems like he's eager to do that, and Chitpattana or Pech was ranked number 1, so why not put him in for this one? Of course, he's the kind of biggest name out of the two fight nights in which Top Rank are putting on over Sunday and Monday. It's first of all excellent to see that they're putting on these two events, and I'm very excited to be watching them. And as a fan of the smaller weight divisions, it's great to see Japan, of course, being put on this high platform, being put in the position where they should be, and being put as a bit more of a face of boxing now. And not only have we got these two fight nights in Japan this weekend, we also have Nonchinga fighting Yabuki, that's also in Japan, but then also, not in Japan, but Taka, Takai is fighting Royval. So Take is fighting Royval in the UFC as well. He's a Japanese fighter who's also been kind of put on a big name as a big name now. So like I say, it's great for Japanese fighting in general this weekend, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting fight. I think Petch is coming in as a very big underdog. Obviously, he has this crazy record in which, on paper, I suppose you'd look at and be like, wow, this is a really tough test. This is a guy who's clearly got loads of experience at a high level, but you really can't look too much into it like that because a lot of the wins are just very base level wins, 4 rounders, 6 rounders. He could probably just cruise through them and get the wins, and they're not really testing himself. I mean, the kind of major time he has tested himself was against Takuma Inoue, like I say, back in 2018. He had little bits of success in the fight, but Takuma relatively was convincing enough to be able to win and put on a pretty solid performance, and that was back in 2018. And I think Takuma has come a long way since then. So, nonetheless, it kind of does show that the record is a bit padded, a bit stacked, not really too many interesting fights around in there. Of course, he has had one other fight in which I thought was a bit of a tough test for him. That was against Rosier. That was another southpaw, and I think he had a bit of a tough test there and a bit of a perhaps trickier timing than which he expected. But still, then, like I say, he was able to win, and it was still relatively comfortable. But he did seem like he struggled with the southpaws a bit at the time, and I think that was the only time in which he has faced the southpaw. I might be wrong. Um, but he was meant to have a world title fight before the Takuma Inoue fight. I think something happened with because it was meant to be in Paris, and then the Paris kind of sporting commission didn't, well, French sporting commission didn't want to put it on because there wouldn't really be that many eyes around it because of the football World Cup going on back in 2018. So he then fought Takuma and then of course lost, and that kind of slowed him down and then made him want to go back, I suppose, to just fighting them perhaps easier fights for him. But nonetheless, I respect first Nakatani for bringing him in as a fighter to face him. There's talks about there being possible mismatches on these two Japanese fight nights, but nonetheless, you still got to give them respect for taking them and wanting to keep active, wanting to keep busy, and wanting to keep their names in the kind of forefront of the division. And so I don't discredit that realistically, but like I say, great card in my opinion. And also on this card is starting off an amazing fight: Olascuga versus Bomba Gonzalez for the WBO World Flyweight title. Like I say, I think it's an amazing fight. Olascuga is coming off a very destructive, great win last time out, which he landed a beautiful twist uppercut punch. It was amazing to see. And Bomba Gonzalez is moving up back into the flyweight division after being such a dominant fighter in the light flyweight division. He was seemingly kind of waiting around for it to like a Taraji fight or another big name fight to happen. But he's moving back up, and he's fighting for the belt, which is the last time he fought for he did lose, and that perhaps that says something. But I still respect him for coming back up and trying to go again. And against Olascuga is going to be a very tough test. Well, Gonzalez hasn't really been the most active, but he's still not too old, and I don't think he's past his best by any means. I think that Gonzalez is going to win via unanimous decision. I really respect Olascuga for so early on in his career really taking the big fights available to him and not shying away from anybody. Of course, he fought Taraji and he came up short, and he did get stopped, but it was still, a good showing from him. Perhaps defensive things he still had to improve on, and that was coming with the development. But it was still, like I say, not a bad showing from him. I just think it's the same thing here. I think Gonzalez is going to be able to wear the kind of shots in which Olascuga can put, and if he puts himself on him, if Gonzalez is as kind of in your face and as hard to be able to tie down to pin down, in which he normally is, I think he could have a lot of success. And I think Olascuga might get frustrated going into the later rounds or the mid rounds because he's not able to push the pace and not able to show his attacking ability in which he has. I think he could definitely have picked opposition that would have been easier for him than this fight, that could have really showed his skill level and really showed his attacking abilities, because he has such great attacking abilities. I don't think Gonzalez is going to allow him to show that, and I think Gonzalez is going to be in his face, causing the fight, creating the fight. I think it's going to be two attacking forces up against each other, but in the end, I think Gonzalez's experience is going to be too much and it's going to push him through to be able to get a unanimous decision victory. But then again, I don't think that Olascuga's career is then going to have to go back to rebuilding and things like that. I still think he is around as one of the best flyweights around at the moment, but just like I say, he's taken one of the really tough tests in Bomba Gonzalez. Perhaps he's taken him at a point in his career where maybe it's a good time to take him, but still, I think it is too much for Olascuga. And then also on this card, of course, there's Nasukawa as well, who's one of the biggest names in Japanese boxing at the moment, so that's another huge name to have on the card. But there is also Tanaka versus Cafu for the WBO World Super Flyweight title. It's a good fight, I think. Carfu is coming in as a bit of an unknown, but I don't think he's a bad fighter at all. He's had He's had one or two good wins in the past. You kind of look at like a Nicholas Chalk, who's just gone on to become IBO champion. That's not a bad win for him, and he has built himself up. He's gotten a few draws early on in his career where perhaps the fights were close and they were, you know, evenly matched, but I still think he is a relatively good fighter, and he's earned himself to be able to get this title shot. And against Tanaka, who, of course, is, I believe, the quickest four-weight world champion ever, or something like that. It's crazy, you know. Of course, he is a four-weight world champion. He was able to make that true last time out and was put on a very good performance. He's progressed really well very quickly. He did, of course, get stuck when he fought Ioka, and that was against an Ioka who was just amazing. He was showcasing his counterpunching ability on a great scale. Perhaps he is now in a point in his career where he's a little bit past that peak, but when he fought Tanaki, he was on it, and he was really switched on, and he was putting on a real kind of showing, and he showed that age that was around with him and that power that he has, and Tanaka was just not able to deal with that, and perhaps defensive things he just think he could walk through him, and he really couldn't do that, and that's where he came unstuck. But since then, like I say, he's improved. I think defensively, I think he's learned in his mind that he can't just kind of rush through everybody and keep progressing through the weights like he has been doing, because I think because he would have come unstuck at some point, and that of course did happen. But now he's at a point now I believe he is a more whole, kind of more improved fighter. It's interesting to see his name not kind of get talked about a bit more, to be honest. Of course, like I say, what he has achieved so far is so excellent, but he just doesn't seem to have his name talked about quite so much as perhaps some of the other bigger names. I don't think he is quite around the biggest names in Japanese boxing as of yet. I think he's just kind of on that outskirts, and I think this fight isn't going to, boost his stock too much, but I still think he's going to win. I think he's going to win by a TKO in round 8. I don't think Cafu's a bad fighter. He's a back foot fighter typically, but I think Tanaka is going to be a bit more defensively sure and a bit more able to deal with a back foot fighter than he once was, like I say, against Ioka, and I don't think Cafu is at Ioka's level, and I think Cafu, who has that much lesser experience, won't be able to go to 12-round distance, and I think he probably will slow down, and I think he will probably tire. And I think that's where Tanaka will be able to get, like I say, a stoppage. He has power in his punches as well, and like I say, when he lets his hands go, he does throw good, strong combinations, and that's where I think, like I say, he get that stoppage win, that TKO in round 8, in my opinion. Then going back to the main event, Nakatani as a fighter, there's various things I could say about Nakatani, but I won't mention them all. I'll just mention a handful of things because of how good he is. Like I always say with the pound for pound best fighters, you can't name necessarily everything. But of course, he changes levels excellently. Like I say, that shot that he caught Astrolabia with last time out was a beautiful shot, and it just seems so effortlessly. It was beautiful, and he looks sharp, he looks spiteful in his work, and everything he seems to throw, even though it looks like it's coming from such a relaxed kind of setup, it's just really causing a lot of damage, and that straight 1-2 body shot is something that he has pretty much on lockdown, and it's beautiful every time he manages to land with it. He's got very good movement as well. I think he is able to, throw them combinations and then come out of the way and then reset and then be able to, react to a counter and get away from a counter, and it's beautiful to see. He finds range very well, he's very relaxed. His accuracy, of course, is beautiful, and, perhaps there has been defensive things in the past that maybe he's had to improve on a bit, and a performance like this he may be overlooking somebody like a Petch, and definitely could be thinking about the other big fights in which are being talked about, but perhaps he is due a bad performance. I think there has been certain performances in the past, in between some of the excellent ones in which he's had, where maybe he has looked a little bit off and hasn't been able to show his best, and like I say, has not struggled but not shown his best, and perhaps this could be due that time. He's got rangy combinations. He's very good at keeping you away as well with that big frame, but he's got a similar type of frame to that of Petch, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out. He's got very good timing, and he's very controlled in his work. Negatives about him, I think perhaps sometimes he can take unnecessary risks and perhaps commit to shots from which he doesn't necessarily have to. He's got quite wide hooks at times, so I think when he does get you hurt and he does get you on the ropes, he will stand straight on with quite wide hooks and then become that bit more of an open target. He often throws from the hip, so perhaps you can see it a little bit better, or if you time him onto an overhand, then you can catch him with something like that. He's very open often when he is throwing. He stands tall. His physicality isn't anything too crazy. Perhaps Petch might have that little bit extra physicality about him. Not too sure. He if his opponent plants his feet, I think then often he can struggle a little bit more because he's not able to work around the target because the opponent wants to throw that, like I say, that big overhand, and that will try and push him back and stop his momentum coming forwards. He's also sometimes admires his work as well. I think when you are getting these one shot kind of knockouts, obviously they're beautiful to see, but I think it does result in fighters admiring their work a little bit and just being and not reacting enough if things are going well. Of course, they land a nice punch, but then they can get caught back with another one, which, like I say, Nakatani is able to move out the way a lot of them, but sometimes I think he does admire his work. Petch as a fight, I think he's got a nice high guard, a strong, solid jab. He works the body well, he imposes himself relatively well, and these are things that can be interesting to see how Nakatani is going to be able to deal with that. He can fight at mid or an in close range. I think he bursts into his punches, so that could catch Nakatani out at times with them, like I say, bursts into his shots. Not too explosive, but like I say, there is a little bit of a speed, kind of a sudden speed increase when he is going into his punches. He lets his hands go. He's a front foot fighter a lot of the time, so maybe he might not be able to deal with being on the back foot from Nakatani. He's powerful and he's got solid bodywork as well. So similar. He wants to go for similar shots to an extent as that of Nakatani. I think maybe he watches a lot of Nakatani and studies at work, but like I say, perhaps a similar stylistic fighter to Nakatani, but just levels. I don't necessarily know if he is quite that high enough level to Nakatani's. Negatives about him, I think, like I say, I think he does struggle to deal with southpaws and getting past the front foot, and can really just stand and take quite a lot of shots just because he can't get past the front foot. Creating angles, he really doesn't work his angles that nicely. I think he stands quite tall, stays in range. When it's not when it's not at his tempo, I think he can get a bit frustrated and can get caught out. His head can be on the line. I think his skills in general, his boxing ability is a little bit more limited than that of Nakatani's. I think his timing isn't amazing. He comes on to punches. He doesn't always make a lot of adjustments if things aren't going his way. He just kind of hopes that things improve. He does get hit a lot, and I don't necessarily think he will reset back if he needs to. I think, like I say, we'll just stand and wait and just hope that the opponent stops throwing, which, he can do that against these lower level Thai fighters that he's been fighting, but I just don't necessarily think he can do that against a Nakatani if he gets pushed back against him. Nakatani is the favourite. I think that Nakatani is going to win via KO in round 5. I could see it being a big knockout. I could see it being a TKO. I still think it's going to be round 5 relatively early on in the fight, and Nakatani is pretty much going to be able to have his way with him, I believe. Perhaps he could have a little bit of success, Petch, because being the taller fighter, offering something a bit different, imposing himself. But I think as soon as Nakatani finds his rhythm, finds his accuracy, I think he could really damage Petch, who, like I say, takes a lot of punishment, push him back, and then he doesn't really necessarily know what to do. And I just don't think he has that skill set high enough to be able to deal with what Nakatani can offer and what Nakatani will deliver. And then, like I say, Nakatani via stoppage in round 5. Then who he could go on to fight? In the division, the biggest fight is Takuma Inoue for the bantamweight division, but he's fighting Satsumi. Satsumi could cause him problems, so I wouldn't necessarily straight away say that Inoue versus Nakatani is next. Of course, they're fighting for the WBA belt. It seems like Nakatani is going to fight on the same show as Inoue, come early next year, and then there talks about him, Nakatani fighting Naoya into the summertime of next year. So I don't think Inoue is going to be the next fight for Nakatani. Well, Takuma might be, but yeah. So other than that, something like a Contreras perhaps could be another option if he wants to, say, keep developing with these fighters that are also ranked highly and trying to wipe out the division fully. He's been a bit inactive though, Contreras, so I'm not too sure if that could happen. Or a Takai. I think Takai's belt is really there for the taking, that WBO belt. I think Nakatani could easily go and wipe through a lot of the champions. Pretty much all the champions if he wants to in the bantamweight division. I think he is able to do that. Will he? We'll have to wait and see. Like I say, he has been moving through the divisions relatively quickly. Hasn't really been trying to get all the belts, and if you're trying to cement that legacy, you want to have all the belts and you want to have that name for yourself. And I think, like I say, some of the belts in the bantamweight division, obviously they're all held by Japanese fighters, and perhaps they're not always too known to fight each other. but I do think they are definitely there for the taking, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with them. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like it if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.